Hello and welcome. This is Congress Congrows with Americans for Prosperity. We are thrilled to have Senator Marsha Blackburn here today. I am Ted Ellis. I'm the Director of Coalitions for Americans for Prosperity. I will be proudly hosting our conversation here today. So Senator Blackburn is the first woman to represent Tennessee in the United States Senate. She is a member of the Armed Services Committee, the Commerce, Science, and Transportation Committee, Veterans Affairs Committee, and the Judiciary Committee. And in that post in Judiciary, she serves as the top Republican on the Consumer Protection, Product Safety, and Data Security Subcommittee. In the previous Congress, she led the Senate Judiciary Committee's Tech Task Force, a roundtable-style working group dedicated to the examination of technology's influence on American culture. She is also my home district rep from back in her days in the U.S. House. She has been a taxpayer champion for many, many years, including when she led the fight to abolish the state income tax in Tennessee. Thank you so much for your continued service of Tennessee and the American taxpayer over the many years, Ms. Blackburn, and we are very proud to have you here.
I'm delighted to join you. Thank you so much, and always appreciate the great work that AFP and your volunteers do in the state of Tennessee. Thank you for that.
Absolutely. Well, we're fantastically glad to have you. And let's kick this off. So, Senator Blackburn, we have seen a tremendous level of inflation hitting American pocketbooks. I know that I've been feeling it here in Washington, D.C. I know that my family back home in Tennessee has been feeling it. It has been record levels. What are we going to do about it? Why are we seeing this? We know that the Congress recently passed a giant spending bill at the request of President Biden. How are all of these things tied together, and what can we expect going forward?
Yeah, let's start with the why we are seeing this. And it is because primarily of two things. Number one, on day one, Joe Biden declared war on the energy sector. He canceled the Keystone Pipeline. He turns around and says, no offshore drilling. You can't drill in Alaska. These are all decisions he made. And of course, we are an energy-based economy. Now, what they did also was to increase federal spending, $6.8 trillion that has been spent on COVID relief, the Build Back Broke agenda that they have had. And now they're talking about a continuing resolution that would end in December, not next year. The reason for this is because they're looking for another opportunity to spend more before they lose the House and the Senate. And what can we do about this is, first of all, we have to make certain that we have Republicans in control of the House and the Senate. And then you have to move forward with freezing federal spending, freezing federal salaries, freezing federal employment. I also have legislation that it's a really great bill. I filed it last December. And in times of high inflation, which the CBO pegs at 4%, then you would have to have a supermajority, that 2/3 majority vote, in order to pass a spending bill during those times of high inflation. So those are some of the ideas that are on the table. And going back also, a balanced budget amendment with no new taxes. That is how you get this all under control. But what we know is that everything that Joe Biden and the Democrats have done is making the lives of the American people tougher. I hear it every single day in Tennessee from Tennesseans who say it's harder to make ends meet. Yeah, I had one mom tell me you can't fill up the gas tank and the grocery cart in the same week. They're having to pick and choose. They're looking at picking up a second job during the holiday season that is approaching because they're having difficulty making ends meet.
Senator Blackburn, I think that is fantastic. I think your approach is one that is prudent and wise. I do very much like the idea of requiring a super majority to increase spending. And we certainly need caps on federal spending in many, many ways. I think a lot of people would say that one of the first steps as well is just recognizing that there is a problem. Would you say that among the Senate or the Congress at large, that there is a recognition that out of control federal spending is a giant part of what is driving these record high inflation rates that we're seeing?
I think there is a recognition. I'm not sure there's a willingness to admit it, but there is a recognition. And all you have to do is look at the fact that when Joe Biden took office, inflation was at 1.4%. And where is that inflation now? You're upwards of 8%. You're pushing 9%. You're looking at food costs that have elevated 13.5%. Fuel costs that have escalated 68%, all in the past year. And people are going, my goodness, what is going on here? Because it is making life too expensive to afford. I talk to parents all the time that set the kids down and said, hey, we can't afford to do fall ball or travel soccer or a travel football team this year because of what the cost is to get to those out of town games, what it costs to eat when you're on the road, what hotel costs are when you have to overnight for these games. So those are the real life decisions that people are having to make because you're looking at this out of control spending that has upped this rate of inflation.
Absolutely. I think, I had hoped that the fact that we're experiencing this record inflation, these tough economic times that, we're staring down the barrel of something big, I think.
Yeah.
It had been my hope that might inspire some fiscal discipline on behalf of the Congress writ large. And it sounds like maybe that's not the case, which is unfortunate. One of the things that sort of rode along with this horrible big government, quote, Inflation Reduction Act, although you and I know, of course, that it did nothing of the sort. In fact, it contributed to inflation. But one of the things that rode along with that was a proposal from Democratic Senator Manchin to enact permitting reform. I wonder if you could give us a little bit of insight into what exactly he proposed, whether it would have been helpful, and if not, what should the future Congress think about in terms of regulatory reform, red tape, because our astute listeners will no doubt know that as of now, that has been pulled out of the continuing resolution and will not be featured.
Yeah, that's right. It has been pulled out. And, Senator Manchin liked to say he got a deal. And that's why he supported the erroneously named Inflation Reduction Act, which was more money into the Green New Deal, didn't do anything to reduce inflation. Indeed, it just ran it up. Now, there were two different permitting proposals that were out there. One was Senator Capito's, which was true permitting reform, and Senator Manchin's, which really kind of made things worse. Here are some of the things that it would do. There were 3 programs that really would have made things worse. Now, your viewers and those that are with AFP probably know that eminent domain becomes an issue when governments try to go in and then exercise that eminent domain on private property. Indeed, we've seen some pretty testy court cases on this issue. Well, it would authorize private companies to exercise that eminent domain. And this is something that, in my opinion, would have devalued the private property rights of individuals, their ability to negotiate out a settlement or a sale if someone was looking at their property for expansion. Second, we've all heard of FERC, and that is one of these agencies that deals with utilities, and sometimes they're as difficult as other federal agencies that are there. And it would authorize FERC to command utilities to construct entirely new transmission facilities whenever and wherever FERC deemed necessary. Now, here is the issue with that. As you see this Green New Deal push, this push that they're trying to facilitate to move toward more electric power generation and thereby more distribution. And let's say you're an electric power co-op. If FERC came in and told you, you've got to build new transmission facilities so you can carry more load because we need to put in electric vehicle charging stations, then they would be commanded to do that. And that may not be what the members of that co-op would vote for or what they would want to do. Or maybe it is something that they say, we have more gas-powered or hybrid vehicles. We don't need all of these heavier transmission lines to carry this load. So you want to leave that authority with the generators and with the owners of utilities. Many of them are owned by cities and by communities. So this would take that authority away from them. And third, it would authorize companies to spread cost of constructing new transmission facilities onto residents of other states, requiring citizens of one state to subsidize the agenda of politicians and bureaucrats in other states. So let's say that you live in a state like Tennessee, where your electric power costs are manageable. But let's say that there is a state around you that decides they're going to go all in on the Green New Deal. They're going to accept this command from FERC to build all of these new facilities, and they get part of their power from your state. Well, all of a sudden, you find yourself having to see an increase in your bills because you're having to pay for the construction costs that are actually serving neighbors, friends, and relatives that live in a different state. So these are things that it would do. And instead of fixing the problem of it makes no change to NEPA. Now, these are your environmental regulations. And we've all heard the problems that center around what happens with these environmental regulations. It makes it very difficult. This is one of the main reasons, environmental regulations, that you have not seen new oil refineries built. It is the reason that pipelines have problems when it comes to construction. And of course, Senator Manchin thought he was getting a carve out so that a pipeline in West Virginia could be completed, but we know that that has kind of backfired on him. What you do not want to do is give federal environmental regulators at the EPA, more power to go in and shut down some of these energy construction projects. What we need to do is make certain that states, not the federal government, but states hold this authority. That is why Senator Capito's approach to this was a much preferred approach than Senator Manchin's.
It sounds like the approach that Senator Manchin was, proposing was one that, while called permitting reform, really had a lot more to do with imposing a top-down mentality. You talked about taking away control from localities. You talked about redistributing wealth from one state to another. If one state has a good energy plan and another state wants to go Green New Deal with their style of energy, well, now this other state, like Tennessee, for example, is going to have to subsidize that. That doesn't sound like permitting reform at all to me. And let's hope that ideas like Senator Capito's can have much better time next Congress. Obviously, that will be a strong priority of AFP's. We've fought against red tape for many, many years. We'll continue to do so, and we know that we have your partnership on that, Senator Blackburn. Thank you very much. Now, one more thing that I'd like to discuss, and this is, of course, right in your wheelhouse, but the so-called Inflation Reduction Act came with a bevy of taxes on the American people, taxes that, we've always said are going to shut down growth, are going to slow the economy. And indeed, some people, the Federal Reserve, for example, are talking about the need to slow down the economy. And gosh darn it, Senator Blackburn, that is not the way that we look at things. How are you looking at the role of increased taxes in the economy? And, what should Congress be doing if not this?
It is astounding to me that this administration and the Democrats in the U.S. House and the U.S. Senate think that you can tax your way out of a recession. They think you can just go spend more and tax more, and everything is going to be just fine. And that is really quite the opposite. Why do we have this? It is because we have too much spending. It is because of energy, as we have discussed. Now, it is no time to be raising taxes. What we should do, and what I look forward to doing in the new year, is let's make the Trump tax cuts permanent. The bill that we passed under President Trump, look at what it did to spur economic growth. Look at what it did to get down inflation. My goodness, inflation was 1.4% when Joe Biden took office. Look at what it did to raise wages. When you run the metrics, regardless of how you break it out based on age, based on different demographic groups, wages, salaries, take-home pay, everything was rising at the fastest rate that we had ever seen. Unemployment was lower than most people had seen in their adult lifetime. And this is what helped lead to raising wages and new jobs and new opportunities. And that is how you get a growing economy. But the more the federal government comes in with their heavy hand, the more they say, we're going to take a bigger share of that paycheck, then the more they say, we're going to leave individuals with less. Then that is going to continue to cause problems for families. It is going to continue to drive up this inflation rate, and it's going to keep us in a recession.
I could not have said it better myself. Of course, thank you, Senator Blackburn. That was excellently encapsulated. Y'all, we are looking for an agenda of low taxes, good pay, abundant jobs, abundant American energy, and light red tape. If you're on board with that agenda, please join us at End Washington Waste, our official page for the time being. It's our big campaign. Senator Blackburn, we certainly appreciate having you on. Is there any other thoughts that you would like to leave with us, the grassroots in Tennessee?
I would just remind everybody that there is an economic formula that works beautifully every single time. If you want to have economic growth, if you want jobs growth, if you want prosperity, then it is less regulation plus less taxation plus less litigation equals more innovation and job creation. That works every single time. That is what the focus of the House and the Senate should be. And I look forward to returning us to some of those basic concepts.
That is absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much, Senator Blackburn. It has been a tremendous pleasure having you on.
Thank you so much.